I'm so excited to introduce you to the best website designers out there. We have a brand new partnership with Session Sites. It is where good therapy meets brilliant design, and they get your website switched over or built in less than 2 weeks. They fine tune your messaging, use science backed user experience methodology, and work exclusively with mental health professionals. In fact, new clients right now are going to get 3 free therapy marketing strategy calls with their creative director of Session Sites if you book today. You're not going to want to miss this. Head on over to sessionsites.com/Joe. Again, that's sessionsites.com/Joe. Get the website of your dreams today. Sessionsites.com/Joe. This is the Practice of the Practice podcast with Joe Sanok, session number 1162. Welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast. I am Joe Sanok, your host. Welcome to the show. This entire month, we are doing Marketing Month. Last month, we did the Even Better Year series where we talked about that idea of small steps in the right direction. That when we're in a new year, oftentimes it's all these big, ridiculous goals that we give up by the beginning of February. Well, we are trying to make this an even better year. So go back and listen to that series. Had some amazing content. We talked about healing trauma and embracing the Asian American identity. We talked about evidence-based content for your clients. We talked about psychedelic medication at the end of your life. We talked about non-obvious thinking. So many things that are just great steps in the right direction. Well, today on the show, we have Gee Ranasinha, who is the CEO of Kexino, which is over the past 16 years, he has helped over 400 startups and small businesses in over 20 countries grow awareness, reputation, trust, and sales. He has been one of our Ask the Experts in our membership community, has been one of my go-to marketing guys. And when it comes to just how we're going to have this conversation, today's a little bit different. He has presented and put together a presentation for us that's going to be interactive, that is going to be guided rather than the kind of typical just conversation that we have. So I'm super excited about this. I don't really even know what I'm in for, but Gee, welcome back to the Practice of the Practice podcast.
Great to see you again, Joe. Hope you've been well. Thanks for inviting me back.
Yeah, I'm so excited for this. I love how you are bringing your teaching, which you do as a professor, into what we're doing here with this audience.
Well, I think, the more people can be aware and educated about the basic principles, which is basically what I'm going to be talking about today, the basic principles of marketing and the stages involved and the steps involved in sequence, and then being able to tailor that to your particular type of practice. The more aware you are of that process, hopefully the better final result you can get, as well as spotting the, let's call them snake oil sellers or charlatans, the people who, promise the world and deliver SFA, if you like.
Yeah, I've been there. Had many people who've given money.
I think we've all had our fingers burnt on those sorts of things at some point in time. So, better to be forewarned and forearmed, and that's really what I'm trying to do here.
So awesome. Well, where should we start?
Well, we can start here with I'll give you a short summary for those of us who weren't around for my earlier presentation. I give you just a 36,000 feet view of me, and then we'll dive into the steps involved in putting together a strong, solid marketing plan, which you can then build on from a tactical aspect. So that's what we're going to start with. So if we kick off here, you can see I've got it nicely branded for you, Joe, as usual. So unlike the previous presentation, my deck is going to be rather wordy, which is the polar opposite of 99.9% of my presentation. So I apologize in advance for that. However, I think since today is about execution, it's almost like I'm looking at it almost like a workshop. I don't think we can sort of do that without getting our hands dirty a little bit. Okay.
And Gee, before we
So,
go in too far, I do want to let people know that as we do this podcast, we are videoing Gee's screen, and our team is going to be putting this up on YouTube. So if you do want to see the slide deck along with as Gee is talking, feel free to bounce over to YouTube, look at our YouTube channel. That'll help you out if there's some visuals that you're like, oh, I can't hear that in the podcast. So just wanted to note that.
that's a good point. Okay. So, blatant plug. Who am I? Who the hell am I? I've been in sales and marketing for the last 25 odd years, in organizations based in the US, the UK, Germany, and France, primarily in the B2B space, but also extensive experience in working with clients offering professional services rather than products, which I think makes me more than qualified to talk about how practitioners might improve their marketing effectiveness. I founded 3 small businesses myself. Firstly, I started an advertising and post-production company many years ago. Then I had a content localization agency, which was creating optimized in-language content for brands, publications, SEO, that sort of thing, which we sold 3 years ago. And, of course, that brings us up to today, which is Kexino, where we are a small business marketing agency, and behavioral science consultancy. We position ourselves primarily around strategy and behavioral science. We're 19 people in 9 countries. 9 of us are based in the US. The rest are in Europe, South Africa, Japan, and Australia. Like I said, 90% of our clients are in the US. You wouldn't have heard of most of them because they're, small solopreneurs or small businesses themselves. However, there may be some that you would have heard of. People like Adobe, Intel, Google, Fujifilm, Sony Entertainment, Timberland. And we've also been featured in a number of, well-known publications, websites as well. Finally, as you mentioned earlier on, Joe, I teach. You know what they say about people who can't do, they teach, right? So I do a lot of teaching. No, this is true. So I teach marketing and behavioral science at 2 business schools, which I've been doing for just over 10 years now. So that's me. So enough of that nonsense, and let's get on to what we're here about, which is how to fix your broken marketing. And make no mistake, marketing is broken. And what we need to do is to look and to see why it's broken. And the reason why it's broken is primarily because people who think they're doing marketing are actually not doing marketing. They're doing promotions. They're doing communications, which is certainly part of marketing, but it's a tiny percentage of what marketing is actually about. And that's really what I sort of want to focus on. So taking a top level view, marketing consists of 3 stages. There's the diagnosis, there's the strategy, and the tactics. There's 3 stages, and they're always in that order. And even more importantly, each stage should take approximately the same amount of time. And the importance of knowing about these 3 stages and how it contributes to your marketing plan is that each stage is multiplicative. So what do I mean by that? I mean, if we screw up our diagnosis, it doesn't matter what we do from a strategy point of view. It doesn't matter what we try to do from a tactical point of view. We're not going to realize the expected results that we thought because we screwed up further up. Okay. Multiply anything by 0. You're always going to get a 0, right? So that's why I wanted to say that these 3 areas are multiplicative. They're not additive. So it's important that we get each stage right. And that was one of the reasons why marketing's so hard, really. So if we start with diagnosis, what is diagnosis? It's very, very simple. Diagnosis is just like when we're talking about healthcare diagnosis. Okay? Before we can come up with the answer, there's a bunch of questions we need to ask, right? We need to work out what the hell's going on. We need to find out what's working, what's not working, find out what and where the pain points are. And I think this is absolutely crucial, because if you don't know the problem, then you can't come up with a solution. You have to have insight to drive your approach, and that insight needs to come from what you could loosely call data. But it's certainly asking the right questions. Let's call it research. Because otherwise you're not marketing, you're just running around waving a wet finger in the air, right? A diagnosis is a very practical thing. It's not rocket science. There's nothing precious about it. It's quite basic. It's low down, dirty, hands in the mud kind of work. And there's a standard way of generating the data and coming up with the insights from that, which is usually from some kind of research, what we would call qualitative research, which is interviews, focus groups, ethnography, whatever makes sense. And we do this to inductively understand the market and the business's place within that market. Once we've done that, we channel those insights, the qual, as we call it, into quant, as we call it, quantitative data, which manifests itself for what we're talking about. It's usually some kind of survey with a list of questions. You've seen this sort of thing. They'll ask you a question and it's like, how much do you agree with this statement? And you've got like little points from like 0 where you totally disagree with it up to say, 5 or 10 where you really strongly agree with it. And there may be a sort of don't know, not sure option there as well. We've all filled in those sorts of surveys, I think. And you put that survey to a representative sample of the market. And that's pretty much as standard as it gets, really. Now there's other things you can do. You can, partner with publications, industry groups, get involved with conferences, seminars. But, regardless, at a pinch, at the lowest level, most businesses, I think, can certainly get away with just doing the quant and hopefully the qual if they know what they're doing. And once you've done that, you move on to segmentation, targeting, and positioning. But before we can get into that, there are, let's say, 8 questions. Is it 8 questions or 6 questions? 6 questions, sorry. 8 is the number 8 figures later on. There are 8 questions that you need to be able to ask yourself. Sorry, there's not 8, 6 questions that you need to be able to ask yourself, to have the answers to, in order to begin that marketing strategy on which you can then build your tactical plan. So, you need to know the top 3 pains that your ideal client faces. We call them ICPs, which is Ideal Client Profile. Marketing is full of 3-letter acronyms, as I think most of these sort of jargon-based industries are. So it's coming up with the top 3 pains that your ideal client faces. And more importantly, the everyday frustrations that's caused by those pains. How do they manifest themselves in the lives of the people that we're trying to target? The next question are the triggers. The triggers that prompt our target client to go and actually seek out a solution to the problem that we're looking for. Okay? Next question. Why solving these problems is transformative for the client? And the best way of asking that question to a representative sample is to say, what about if you do nothing? What's at stake by going with the status quo? Because as you know, if you're in 2 minds about buying something, there's a pretty good chance, if you're in conflict about whether to go and buy something or not, there's an overwhelming desire to just stick with what you've got, right? You're too afraid to make a wrong decision. So you have an almost analysis paralysis by not being able to make that decision. So it's important to know what that status quo situation is to be able to communicate that in your marketing materials, right? After that, we need to know how they behave, how they consume content, the information channels that they trust and look for when they're researching solutions like ours. Where do they go? What websites do they visit? What journals do they buy? What podcasts do they listen to? Of course, they listen to the Practice of the Practice podcast, but after that, what else do they listen to? Right? Fifth question is, how do they think about our category? How do they view the market and the competitors in that category? I think, your industry and my industry shares some concern and trepidation for new market buyers. They don't want to have their fingers burnt. They've heard horror stories. And so at the beginning of any customer interaction, what we're all selling is the same thing. We're selling trust, right? Because if people don't trust you, then they won't take the next step. So I think that's an important point to understand how they think of us so that we can either address those obstacles up front in our communication or deal with them in some other way. And then finally, it's to understand their selection process. What does it look like? What does, in marketing speak, we'd call it the buying cycle, but I don't think it's really relevant when we're talking about services such as practitioners. But what are the steps involved to purchase from getting to the awareness stage through till the point of actually getting in touch, finding out more, and hopefully making that first appointment? What does that all look like? And it's good to map that out, to sort of schematize. Is that even a word? I don't know. I just made it up. If it is, if it isn't a word, it's a word now.
As a therapist, I can tell you from experience that having the right EHR is an absolute lifeline. I recommend using Therapy Notes. They make billing, scheduling, note-taking, telehealth, and e-prescribe incredibly easy. Best of all, they offer live telephone support that's available 7 days a week. You don't have to take my word for it. Do your own research and see for yourself. Therapy Notes is the #1 highest rated EHR system available today, with a 4.9 out of 5 stars on trustpilot.com and on Google. All you have to do is click the link below or type promo code Joe on their website over at therapynotes.com and receive a special 2-month trial absolutely free. Again, that's therapynotes.com and use promo code Joe on the website. If you're coming from another EHR, Therapy Notes will also import your demographic data quick and easy at no cost, so you can get started right away. Trust me, don't waste any more of your time and try Therapy Notes. Just use promo code Joe at checkout. I love that you bring up that, because so often what happens is, maybe a client sees you on Psychology Today, they go to your website, they then click to schedule an intake, and rather than it just go to a schedule, which is what your prompt says, schedule an intake, it goes to a contact us form. They then have to wait 48 hours to a week if they even get a response back, or they have to call a phone number, versus how do we remove all of that friction, to be able to have, just to be able to have, a very clean, easy process. And so I love that you bring that up as part of that diagnosis phase.
Well, I think it's very important that we do our homework before we start rolling up our sleeves and get involved in all of this tactical stuff. And for me, what we're talking about is effectiveness rather than efficiency, which was the subject of our previous conversation. And effective marketing starts with strategy, while many people jump straight into the tactical stuff, which, strategy always comes before tactics. This is the number one reason why so many small business owners and solopreneurs fail at marketing, because they jump straight into the tactical stuff without having done any strategy. So what do I mean when I say strategy? Strategy is where we evaluate the targeting choices we have and we come to some decisions on who we're going after. And then we have to position ourselves to those targets and define what the objectives are going to be. Strategy is as much about what you say no to as what you say yes to, if that makes sense, right? So I'm going to go deeper into strategy in a minute, but once you've got to the strategy and you've mapped that all out and you've done your diagnosis and you're looking, pretty good, the third stage, as we had on the earlier slide, are tactics. And the tactics are split into what I believe still to be 4 executional elements. Some people know these as the 4 Ps. Now, the concept of the 4 Ps has been around for a long time. The Ps that I'm talking about are product, even if it's a service, right? Pricing, placement, and promotion. Now, 4 Ps has been around a long time. I mean, it's since like the 50s. It originally came up. It was thought of by a gentleman by the name of Neil Borden, who was an advertising professor at Harvard. And over the years, the marketing industry has evolved and people have added other Ps. So today, some people say there's 5 Ps or 6 Ps or 11 Ps, or regardless of whether it's 5, 6, there's too many Ps. It's almost painful by the amount of Ps. It's so painful, it's like there's cystitis going around. It's just Ps everywhere. Okay, but regardless of how many Ps, the concept is the same. It's a framework that we build our marketing strategy upon. Now, even though there are 4 clear elements there is somewhat of a grey area of separation between them. They do overlap somewhat, but that's absolutely fine. If we just go through the thought processes and look at these things in isolation, even, as I said, if they overlap, it's not necessarily a bad thing. But like I said, the promotions part, the comms part, communications, is the stuff that people who don't know very much about marketing jump into first, because they don't know what they're doing, right? But they know what they see as an output. And this is probably what the current situation where marketing is seen as almost like a sales support function, right? It's considered in the same way as, as writing blog posts or shouting at people on social media or email blasts about nothing in particular, about trade shows and conferences and stress balls and lanyards and tote bags and that sort of thing. Now, all of that sort of stuff is part of marketing, but it's a very, very small part of marketing. Where we need to start is at the first one of those Ps, which is to understand the product itself, even if in our case it's usually a service. So we need to define the product and its qualities and introduce it to our audience, right? The basic marketing of a product. So who needs what we provide and why? And what do we do that others can't or don't? And there needs to be some kind of hook, some kind of differentiation and indeed distinctiveness, which we will touch upon later on. So I'll go into that a bit more detail. So that was the first P. Second P is pricing. So pricing is obviously the amount that our audience will be willing to pay for what we're offering. It's important here to link the price point to the products, or in our case, services, real value as well as its perceived value, which are 2 separate things. whilst also considering external influences. Okay. Why do we set our rates at the level we do? How price sensitive is our offering? How does price sensitivity change if and when we change the profile of people that we're targeting? Depending on the audience, our hourly rate could be seen as too expensive or far too cheap. And both of those extremes can be detrimental to closing business. Yes, price is important, but what's more important is the perceived value of what is being offered, which doesn't have a direct straight line correlation between price. Next one, placement. This is really a cop-out. I think basically they were looking for another P, because the way I see placement is really distribution. So it's the consideration of where what we're offering should be available and how it's displayed. Okay. So if it was a physical product, it may include like online stores, bricks and mortar retailers, that sort of thing. Okay. Now for service providers, placement also includes featuring or advertising our services in the right way, through the right media, using the right communication channels to get to the attention of the right target audience. That's also availability. That's also distribution. Okay. Picking the right channel and the right way to articulate what we're selling can make or break how we're perceived within the market space. Right. And then the final P is promotion, which is what most people who don't know about marketing think marketing is. And the goal of promotion is to communicate to our audience that they need whatever it is we're selling, and that it's priced accordingly. So promotion encompasses advertising, PR, the overall media strategy, video, podcasts, blogging, all of the tactical execution that we associate ourselves with marketing with an uppercase M. So, any questions so far? You've gone very quiet.
I mean, you're just knocking it out of the park. I think that, these are things that sometimes, when I think about the average clinician, they get out of grad school, they, maybe work at a nonprofit or CMH, they start their private practice. Somebody tells them you should be on Psychology Today. Somebody tells them you should do pay-per-click advertising. Somebody tells them, and oftentimes that somebody's me. I interview one guest that talks about pay-per-click, and then we don't always have that comprehensive plan. We don't even know the questions to ask. And so I love that you're starting with, okay, we need to have that strategy that's based on the diagnosis, that's based on that research of who we're trying to attract. And so I think it's bringing together a lot of these breadcrumbs that maybe we've felt or heard into a cohesive plan around what are we going to do here. Just understanding, okay, yeah, who are we trying to attract? How are we doing that? What do we know about them beyond just what we brainstorm personally? To get together with a yoga teacher, and if we're trying to attract yoga students, to say, hey, I want to try to do better mental health in the community. Is there a chance with your yoga studio to just do a roundtable discussion around mental health? And I hope to add value to those people, but also part of it is I want to learn how to better attract, good quality, yoga students into counseling. And so I think I like how it's bringing it all together in a way that maybe our audience hasn't heard before in as organized of a way.
Good. Well, that's the name of the game. That's the method to my madness. Oh, should use the word madness really in this context, right? Really. Okay. So let's get a little bit more tangible here, because it's all very well talking in abstraction. So creating a marketing plan. What is marketing there to do? Marketing can only ever reinforce create and then reinforce memory structures in the brain, so that when people are looking for a solution that we offer, we are one of the providers that they'll consider. That's all marketing can do. Marketing doesn't generate demand. marketing can't persuade. It can influence a decision, but it can't persuade, because persuasion is like coercion, right? While influencing is helping the prospect, the audience, make as an informed decision as possible by giving them information to make that buying process easier. And that's what we're talking for. And this, like I say, you can see the 8 elements. I was talking about 8 elements earlier on. I got it wrong. These are the 8 elements. So yeah, ignore that before. So what are we doing when creating a marketing plan? There are 8 elements. So the first element we've already discussed. We know exactly what we're talking about, right? It's diagnosis, qualitative interviews, quantitative NPS type stuff, diagnosis of the situation, taking the time to work out what's going on. Every business is different. Even within the category, you may be looking at a slightly different profile of audience. And so the way that you choose to message and articulate that value proposition may change. So it's very individual. It's very bespoke and unique to the business that we're talking about. Once we've done the diagnosis, we need to put together objectives. So we move to define clear and strategic objectives, not too many of them. And an objective needs to have a benchmark and it needs to have a goal. Okay. So it's not, we need to get more inquiries or we need to rank higher on Google, because that's too intangible. Okay. Rank highly on Google. If you go from page 5 on Google to page 1 on Google, but still nobody's calling you, then is it a real tangible objective that's making any measurable difference? It's not. Okay. So an example of a measurable objective would be to say, supposing we wanted to decrease customer acquisition costs by 10% by the end of the next calendar quarter. You see what I mean? So now we've got something tangible, as a goal and a benchmark, because we're comparing it against the previous calendar quarter. Okay. So we could say maybe we want to increase the number of qualified inquiries coming from our website's contact page. At the moment, we're getting on average 20 and we want to get to 30. And we want to get to 30 in the next 3 months. And we compare that to either the 3 months previously or this time last year, whatever makes more sense. Because, you may have a seasonal business, in which case comparing it against the previous 3 months may not make as much sense. Okay. Does that make it's all clear? So then we go on to stage 3 and indeed stage 4. I've put them together. The long and the short. So this is a combination of long-term mass audience brand building work, which shouldn't be targeted or restricted beyond whatever industry or category the business is in. Okay. And the reason is because 95% of your customers are what we call out of market. So we have the long-term brand building work coupled with short-term sales activation work. So this all sounds a little bit geeky, right? So hopefully let me explain it more effectively with some visuals. Okay. So the most effective marketing growth plan, is a 2-pronged approach that combines 2 very different kinds of messaging. Okay. Sales activation messaging and brand awareness messaging. So sales activation messaging, sometimes called direct response or sometimes called performance marketing, which seems a bit of a misnomer because isn't all marketing performance marketing? And nobody wants to do, non-performance marketing, do they? But sales activation stuff that's the sort of stuff that you do for a prospective customer when they are in the phase of looking to make a purchase. They've decided it's time to jump off that cliff to move forward. And obviously, if you're into things like marketing funnels, this is at the bottom of the marketing funnel where the customer is in that decision-making stage and considering their choice and deciding whether what we're offering is appropriate for them and it matches with what they're looking to have, right? So examples of sales activation marketing are offers-based promotions, buy one, get one free, special price for a limited time, free delivery, basically all that Black Friday stuff that, we were seeing a few months ago, and we'll be seeing again, that sort of stuff. So it talks specifically to in-market buyers, okay? And the campaigns are built to focus on capturing existing demand from prospects who already understand the problem they have. They understand they have a problem, and now they're looking the best way to solve it. And now they're just looking for the best business practitioner to solve it for them. Okay. So the messaging needs to be built to attract people who are actively looking to make that purchase for whatever we're selling through our marketing efforts. So that's sales activation. The other side of the coin is brand awareness marketing, sometimes called brand marketing. Okay. So if you think about sales activation as being the quick movement from getting someone from the prospect stage to the customer stage, right? Bottom of the funnel. Brand building can be thought of as, think of it as the work that we do to get the customer's attention so that we are one of those providers for consideration. Okay. So it's to have brand awareness marketing is to have the brand or the service front of mind when the prospect is finally ready to make a purchase, so that they think of us along with whomever else that they're looking to consider. Okay. So it tells the customer exactly who we are, what we do, how we're different, the problem we solve, and basically it's anything that's customer facing version of the company. You can think of it that way, really.
Well, this entire month we are talking marketing. And so if you have missed any of that, please go back, look at all the other episodes, and we have plenty that are coming up as well. Thank you so much for hanging out. We couldn't do this show without our amazing sponsors. Therapy Notes is the sponsor today. They're the best EHR out there. They will help you with all of your electronic health records. As well, they have HIPAA-compliant video, billing, and so many other things. Use promo code Joe at checkout to get a few months for free over at therapynotes.com. Again, that's promo code Joe at checkout. Thanks for letting me into your ears and into your brain. Have a great day. I'll talk to you soon. Special thanks to the band Silence is Sexy for that intro music, and this podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regard to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, the producers, the publishers, or guests are rendering legal, accounting, clinical, or other professional information. If you want a professional, you should find one.